Today's podcast episode is all about, podcasts. I'm joined by Jeff Mendelson. He's the host of the One Big Tip podcast, and he also runs a full-service digital marketing agency. He's based in Miami in Florida, but he runs his business from all over the world. We're going to be talking about how to start your podcast, the advantages and benefits of doing it, how much it can build your authority, and the tool it can be for networking and growing your audience. We'll also cover how to utilize technology to help promote your podcast and to use things like live streaming and to maximize the reach of every podcast episode you produce. This episode is essential listening if you're thinking about starting a podcast or you want some tips on getting higher reach for every episode that you create. Hi, Jeff. Thanks very much for joining me today. Absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. This is going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. Obviously, we've spoken a number of times. We've both been in TCCX in ClickFunnels together, and also we've spoken offline as well about podcasts and about content marketing. And so I know a little bit about you and what you're about, but tell the audience, what is it that you do and who do you help and how do you help them?
Sure. So I have a digital marketing agency. Basically, I started this agency when I was still working in corporate, and I just got fired too many times, right? So the last time I got fired was about 12 and a half years ago, and I haven't looked back. And at first I was like, how the hell am I going to keep up my Starbucks habit, right? How am I going to pay the mortgage? How am I going to pay for the, make that car payment? And, it's just, I've just been blessed to be able to keep on going. And what I've done is that I've really gone with the flow of how the entire digital marketing industry has been going. I started out just doing websites, then got into search engine optimization and paid ads. And then I realized that, just doing someone's website isn't really all that helpful if they have crappy, if they have crappy words on their page. So, you got to help them out with that. And one of the things I got really passionate about was listening to other podcasts, either lives or recorded, things like that, and trying to understand, why these people were going up, making and creating their own platform to, actually put a lot of this great information out. So I felt it was my time to step up. So I started the One Big Tip podcast. And what I found was not only was it a great creative release for allowing me to be able to pay back a little bit of the goodness that I've gotten from other people. But then I found out that podcasting really is the ultimate networking tool. I was able to start talking with people from all around the world and just connecting with them. And not only, and not just anybody. I'm talking like, the heads of these corporations, the heads of these startups, not going through their middlemen, not going through some mid-level director or whatever, going straight to the top, having their cell phone number on my Rolodex, right? And it just became a great medium to meet new people that I probably wouldn't have been able to meet in a, in a live setting, in a convention or otherwise. It was really just great. And now what I'm doing is I'm, helping other people to find that same spark, right? Because podcasting really is not just for creating your own vanity metrics. It's not just about hearing yourself speak. It really is the ultimate lead generation tool. And that's really what I want to teach people today.
Fantastic. So, as you know, I also have a podcast.
You have a great one, actually. Very interesting.
And so I think a lot of what you said resonates with me and the reasons that I started it. But I think since starting it, a lot of the stuff that you've talked about now has come true, even though I didn't know I didn't expect it. I didn't know what to expect really when I started. I think that's one of the hardest things for people getting started with the idea of launching a podcast is they don't really understand what the benefits are. And so therefore with any new thing, there's barriers in the way, there's things you got to learn, there's apps or technology you've got to get your head around. There's actually just thinking, what on earth am I going to actually say and talk about? But I think the benefits of it are, everything you've talked about and more. So I wholeheartedly agree with everything you just said.
What's really interesting about this whole journey is that the second you put a microphone in front of your face, it gives you instant authority, right? You could be the most boring introverted person on earth, but the fact that you actually have the moxie to get up and just start talking, whether it's talk to yourself, talk to a camera, or to do an interview like you and I are doing right now, it really levels you up. It's a different type of confidence. I mean, you're going to be speaking anyways, right? Most of us, most of your listeners, they're professionals. They work in different industries. They have to open their mouths and speak for a variety of reasons. Why not record it? Right? Because if you have to do a sales call, then you can run a podcast. It's as simple as that. And again, it's not about the vanity metrics. It's not about how many downloads you get. It's not about whether you, your mom, and your daughter actually listen to it. It's about the connections that you make. Because what I found is that I've interviewed over 200 people so far. I don't think I've ever been asked directly, well, how many downloads do you have? Is it even worth it for me to get on your podcast? Right? That's not what this is about. It's about connecting with people. It's about getting on other people's audiences to promote your name and your message. And it's about the other people coming on your show to help expand their audiences as well. So, there is a trade-off. There's a trade-off in time. There's a trade-off in, the content that you're getting, right? So I get content from you by doing an interview with you, and then I promote your appearance on my show. Hopefully you're going to take the same assets that I create, and then you promote your own appearance on my show as well to your audience. And then we just grow together. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea of just networking, and not just networking as in meeting cool people like yourself and like all the other guests that I've got on the show so far, but it's also growing your network. It's that aspect of it that I think is really important. But I think one of the things that I didn't expect from it was the audience that listens to it most is my existing audience. And it sounds obvious now I'm saying it, but it gives another medium for people already in your warm audience or even your clients to hear what you have to say, to learn more about you, spend more quality time, so to speak, listening to your ideas and the people that you're speaking to, and you're feeding into their knowledge base. And I think that's a really strong thing to grow, to reinforce the connections you already have. And that's something that is incredibly valuable to keep those relationships going, and hopefully to then keep them with people as clients, or to generate new clients from your leads. So I think
what it is that I call it the subtle flex, right? It's you're walking through a shopping mall and you see a guy with a ripped t-shirt and ripped jeans, but he's wearing a Rolex, right? And you just realize, okay, yeah, like this guy can go and buy, like any six-figure car he wants. It's a subtle flex is what it is. You're flexing, but you're not going out there and saying, hey man, I'm the best. Right. And I think also, I know for a fact, and I accept this, right? I know that my personality is toxic to 2 out of 10 people. Right. I just get it. Some people just listen to me like, I will not do business with this guy. And something, God bless you. Hope you live a long and healthy life. Right. But what happens is that now that I'm putting myself out there, now that you can actually hear me speak, now that you can hear my inflections, now that you can hear the goodness of what I am talking about, and hopefully if it does resonate with you, then great, you will be more inclined to reach out and contact me. Or if my voice just irritates you to no end, then great, we'll never speak. And there won't be a problem with getting into business with somebody that you didn't like. So I think that also the personality comes out, and it really allows you to put yourself out there. People are going to listen to it, right? And it becomes this compendium of knowledge as well. What we're talking about today, what could be the same conversation we would have had 10 years ago. It's also going to be the same conversation we're going to have 10 years from now. That's the beauty of this. I mean, as long as we stay away from current election topics and pandemics that may or may not have affected us by now, by the time you're listening to this, what's going to happen is it is all entirely relevant. The rest of the stuff is bang on exactly what you need to hear, and hopefully the person listening to it will be like, I needed to hear that today. That's going to give me that little extra push to move forward and make my magic happen.
Okay, I agree. And on that note, let's talk about actually getting the podcast off the ground. So if any of the audience are listening to this now and thinking, it sounds like a great idea, but there's some of those classic barriers to getting started with anything. I think with podcasts is probably, I don't know what I'm going to talk about, or I don't have enough to talk about, or who will listen to me is one of the biggest fears. And I think that's something you touched on before with it's not actually about the number of listeners. It doesn't matter how many people are listening. And you'll be probably surprised when you do start a podcast, if you listen to this now, that how many people do end up listening to your podcast. But even if those are the things that people are thinking, that the barriers in the way, what do you say to those people? How do you help to get them over the line and actually just get that first episode out there and launched?
So, to quote Nike is, just do it, right? And what happens is that you can fret over the tech, right? I know I did, and as soon as you put a microphone in front, and it doesn't need to be this, this big hulky mic that I have in front of me right now. It can be a $20 or 25-pound, little lapel mic that you connect to your, phone. It does not need to be, studio quality. You don't need to do this in your closet. You don't need to do this in a sound treated room. Yeah, it may help depending on, where you are and how you're doing it. But I think that the most important aspect of this is, what do you have to talk about? I mean, let's say, for example, you're a financial planner, right? So every time you get a new client in, right, you probably have a process for onboarding them, asking them a couple of questions or whatever, but there is always going to be some kind of client meeting. You're going to have to speak with them either on the phone or face to face. And most likely that script you have honed in on already in your years of working in that particular industry. So being able to talk to people and recording it's actually something you're already doing. So I think that's the part that really scares people. It's like, oh my God, I'm recording this right now. Hell yeah, you're recording it because it's interesting, right? Because it's interesting to touch on those things. And frankly, what happens is that, like one of the things I learned, by being with you in the 2CCX club, for example, you don't necessarily need to pay for a mentorship program in order to be successful, creating sales funnels and leveling up your business. You can go and read the books on your own. The books tell you exactly what to do in addition to whatever masterminds we attended, right? It's all there in black and white. Go read it and implement it. What happens? Some people are going to read it and you're like, oh, that's nice. But they need that extra push. So then they'll join some kind of course, how to create a sales funnel, right? And then they'll go and create it. It's like, oh, it's not working for me. What's the next step? Okay, now I'm going to pay, X thousands of dollars to join a mastermind. And then I'm going to do it as a group so that my group can help me out, right? The fact of the matter is you can do this stuff on your own. You can do this with a little bit of a course. You can hire someone out to help you actually bring it to fruition. But at the end of the day, it's you that needs to take action. It's you that actually needs to make it take off. And a podcast does not necessarily need to be a long-winded 3-hour Joe Rogan experience type thing. We don't need to talk about, like your life before you got married or your dog being sick or how your kids grew up. We don't need to talk about that. I've been on a podcast that was less than 5 minutes where they ask one simple question. Hey, Jeff, can you talk about this? All right, great. 3 sentences later, hit stop on the record. We're done, right? That's a podcast as well. So really what it comes down to is just coming up with a format that you feel will work for the business that you're working on. I happen to be working on the business side, right? So I'm looking at this purely for a networking opportunity. I am trying to meet the greatest amount of people in the shortest amount of time and actually get some great information out of them. There are other podcasters who are telling scary stories. There are other podcasters who talk about all the adversity that they've gone through in their lives and how they're becoming better people for it, right? So there are many different ways for you to address this, right? But I think bottom line for people that have a business it really helps out in terms of branding. It helps out in terms of paying it forward. And really what happens is that you're able to really project that knowledge because, and even if you invite a competitor onto your show, right? It's just showing that that you know enough about the industry, that you respect your industry enough, and you're comfortable enough to bring a competitor on and talk shop with them. I mean, that is gold. How else are you going to do that? Are you going to like drive over to their offices and like, hey, show me around? But I guarantee you, put a microphone in front of my face, put a microphone in front of your face. We can do that, even though like you and I, we do some overlapping things together, right? But there really is no danger in terms of, oh, I'm going to take his clients or he's going to take mine. There's more than enough business for all of us, right? And some people are going to like Steve's face and Steve's way of doing it, and that's great. God bless you. Please go with him. He's great, right? Others are going to like Jeff's, right? And that's also great, and I think we both respect each other in that, in that regard. So basically what I'm saying is that, to get started, you really can start with the minimal amount of equipment. Obviously, if you want to make this more than just a hobby, you should, there's some other, gear that you can get. You can get a key light to, light up your face a little bit better. You can get a dynamic mic so that you sound better as you're talking. Right. But at the end of the day, what happens, it's the skills and the confidence and the aura that you're going to bring to recording that and actually building this library so that you can then show other people what I find what usually happens is like people will ask me, well, how do I know that you know a lot about digital marketing? Well, go listen to my 150 episodes and, let me know what you think. Right. Again, subtle flex. Like I don't need to drive up in a Lamborghini in order to show you how rich I am. Right. But, it's all out there. Google my name. It's all out there. Right. And, I'm a very easy person to find. And I think you'll find that most people who put themselves out there are the same way. Right. Because it is just so easy for us to put that information out there and to make it available on so many different mediums.
Yeah, totally. I think that's it's such a powerful thing for building authority and brand, like you mentioned before, but you mentioned it again now. And I think that's one of the key things to realize that it's one of those mediums which you can't really fool. Like you either have or you haven't created all this content and it's your voice on there. It's not like when you're repurposing people's contents and putting out posts onto Facebook, which anyone could do for you. This is you're speaking, the words are coming out of your mouth. Same as if you did like YouTube lives, it's that sort of medium of this is me, this is Dr. Steve A, and this is Jeff Mendelson. We can't fake that. Well, not yet, not until deep, whatever it's called, deep fake voice comes in properly. But and so therefore it's a real proven authority building, unblaggable process, and I think that's something that's nice. And I think there's something about the audio as well which just makes it a bit more friendly and less salesy in many respects. You don't get many podcasts that are out there just trying to sell on you, sell to you. It's like they're out there to, generally speaking, to help and to pass on information and what we learn in our jobs and our industries and our experiences with our clients. And you mentioned before about people in the professional world having meetings like, for example, Financial Planner. I get loads of the content which is stacked up, ready to come onto podcasts from client meetings. I help them in the meetings. I think that was that was a really useful thing that person I shared with that person today. Let's do a podcast for it. And so there'll be a podcast that'll come out at some point when I need a slot, and I've got a little bank of ideas. And you just create once you start thinking about, I'm going to create a podcast around a topic. Then every time an idea pops in your head, you just stick it on the list, and then you've got something else to talk about. Because I think that was one of my fears was, am I going to have enough to talk about? And now I don't have enough time to do my podcast to get all the content out there. So it's an interesting problem to have. But anyway.
What was interesting about my podcast is that at first I started out as, how the hell am I going to get 4 people a month to talk to me? Right. Because I knew I wanted to be consistent. I knew I wanted to get out there. And it just sort of snowballed. 4 turned to 10, 10 turned to 20, 20 turned to 40, 40 turned to 60. I'm like, wait a second. There's only 52 weeks in a year. Like, Like, what am I gonna like? Next thing you know, I recorded 60 episodes and I was only releasing 20 deep. I'm like, what is this? People are gonna listen to this 6 months later. That's crazy. So I increased the cadence, right? So now I'm not releasing once a week, I'm releasing twice a week, and people just kept on coming. They just kept on coming, and it wasn't until December of 2020, 9 months ago, where I was like, no, I got to stop. I was recording into September, right? And I was like, no, this can't. So basically what I did, I just paused. I already had the content recorded, so it's not like I needed to record any more at that point, and just sort of retooled it, just sort of re-envisioned it. And one of the things that was really interesting, a really interesting revelation, was that I heard this quote last week. YouTube is now, well, it always has been, but just to hear it vocalized, is that it is the universal content search engine, right? Content search engine. There are so many podcasts that are coming on YouTube right now. And you think to yourself, YouTube equals video, but there are plenty of videos that do not feature a face, right? You don't need to be in front of the camera staring at the circular lens in order to do it. And there are some very popular shows that you have probably watched, right? If you're interested in Marvel, you probably saw one or two Looper videos. You probably saw one or two Polygon videos, right? And they're just talking about, the fan theory for Black Widow, or the fan theory for Doctor Strange. And you never see the narrator's face, right? All they're doing is the person that produced it either recorded it, or they got a professional narrator to do it for you, and then they just created a whole video around it, and that's it. And those videos also get tons of views and tons of comments.
Yeah, sorry, Jeff. We on just on that. So we use an app called Headliner, which it just basically puts some audio bars going up and down. So when you haven't got a video, a lot of my podcasts I do record with a video like we're doing now. So when this goes on the YouTube channel, it'll be you'll be able to see our faces. But sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just not convenient to have a video camera or whatever. And so I just basically do the audio bars, and that just gives something interesting to look at. So even if you're at this point thinking, I just don't want to get myself on video, I just podcast is enough, then leave it at that. Just do the podcast bit, but don't, as you're saying, Jeff, like get it onto YouTube as well, but don't worry if it's not got a video in there. Just make sure, your description's right and your hashtags and your title's good and you've got a good thumbnail. And that's what people will actually hone in on. And they don't need to see, you don't need to see your face. Your voice is enough. So yeah, I totally agree.
There are so many great apps out there. So Headliner is one of the best ones. And you're right. Just put a slide up there, and you have the little wave files going, and that's your video. And that becomes searchable because YouTube is the second largest search engine out there. And it's actually a lot easier to rank still on YouTube for particular keywords than it is on Google itself. So it can be an incredible benefit for your brand. It can be an incredible benefit for your business if you decide to pursue that. If you decide to pursue that medium.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question, Jeff, while I've got you. So we've got a bunch of videos that we've put out, podcast videos, and they've gone onto our YouTube channel. We're pretty new to this, and they didn't have keywords added when we were putting them on there. We just basically got our show notes, put them in the description, whacked them on there, and got them on there. And then I've just realized, actually, they should probably have some keywords. And so with something like YouTube, is it worth going back and adding the keywords later, or is the damage done now?
No, you can definitely go back and edit those. I mean, it's your channel, right? So you can go in and edit the title, edit the descriptions, edit the tag.
Not like what I was thinking from the search perspective. It's not like, when you put a web page up and it gets trawled by the bots. I think keywords are different, aren't they? It's because people search for keywords and that's what pulls them up. Is that right?
That's basically correct. And also you can, you can help it out. Like if you go back later and add subtitles to the, to the videos, what's going to happen is those subtitles actually get searched, right? And it's not like YouTube has any trouble automatically subtitling your video anyways in different languages. I mean, I've watched, videos from Brazil that are speaking in Portuguese, but you just turn on the auto captioning, switch it to English, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, now I got this, right? So, I mean, yeah, they got it. They can figure that out. But if you can help the algorithm out by putting in that information, all of that becomes information that's searchable. So yeah, definitely, if you have the time and you have the You have the manpower, go back and retool those. It'll only benefit you.
Yeah. Well, what we did with the subtitles, again, because getting subtitles actually professionally done is actually quite expensive, but we just use an app called Otter.ai, which is like 10 hours a month for free. And that does a pretty good, like 80 to 90% accuracy transcription. And that, if you're only using it for the purpose really of for the search engines to find, is ample. It'll catch all your main words and everything you're using. And so it takes 3 minutes to do. You kick out your SRT file, which is like the caption file, whack that into YouTube, and it's done. So it doesn't need to cost anything, and it doesn't need to take any time to do that, and you still get the benefits from it. So
all it takes is a process and someone to manage it, right? So whether it's you who's going to do it, whether it's your VA is going to do it, somebody needs to do it, right? All of these little details that we're talking about here, right? They all need to be done, right? I know for each episode that I produce, I have like 25 definite tasks that need to happen. They need to be checked off one by one, and they need to go in order. The audio guy needs to do his thing. Then the project manager needs to listen to it, make sure that the audio guy did a good enough job. Then somebody needs to send it to Otter to get transcribed. And then someone's got to check the transcription. And then you got to download it from there and then upload it to YouTube. So yeah, all of those tasks need to happen, right? You just need to be very organized and making sure that it gets done on a consistent basis, right? Because if you're going to be producing this with any kind of regularity, you're going to need to either do it yourself or pay someone to do it. And, I'll leave that to your expertise to talk about finding that person who can actually, get that kind of work done. But the fact of the matter is all of these little details can only help you.
Yeah. But, and this is, I think, a really important thing just to jump in here, you don't need all this to get started. And so just for me, for example, so, I've been outsourcing for years, and it's one of the things I do a lot of and help people do. But when I started my podcast, I actually have a podcast agency that have a lifetime deal with. So they do my editing of the podcast itself, and they produce the show notes and they stick it onto the different channels. But beyond that, the actual promotion of it, all the stuff we just talked about with YouTube and putting into, say, Facebook and LinkedIn, and creating the transcription and putting those on, etc., etc. So creating the thumbnails and the quote cards, all that stuff, none of that is done by them. And so when I started in the podcast, all I did was get the podcast live. That's it. And I did a post, and I got my VA just to do a post saying, "Oh, the podcast has gone live," and it's literally just here's the URL to get on the podcast. And then we slowly went through and started saying, okay, so what's the next thing we could do to help promote this a bit? And then we just added that to the pipeline. So we call it a podcast promotion pipeline. And it's basically taking from the audio file all the way through to having it on YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and quote cards out there and all the rest of it. But we just did it piece by piece. Okay, what's the next thing we can do? Like we just talked about earlier about the hashtags. So that's the next thing we're going to do, is now it's gone on YouTube, we've got thumbnails there. We realized, oh, sugar, we need to actually go back and put hashtags. So now we're going to then get some training on how you get good hashtags, and then give that to the VAs. They're going to do that, and then they can then do that bit. So that's one thing I think people don't realize about. They look at somebody who's successful already. They've been doing it for a long time, and they think they've got to emulate that from day one. And that could be really scary. And that's not the reality. That person didn't.
That's not the reality at all. Yeah.
I think that's it's one of those things that when you realize that, and when you can accept that you won't be as good as, the people that have been doing it for years on day one, but you'll never be as good as them if you don't actually start somewhere. And
not that I'm inviting you or anyone else to do this, but you can go back and listen to my first episodes. Please don't. Right. But if you do, you'll just realize how bad I sucked when I first started. I mean, I think like the first or second episode, I couldn't even pronounce the guest names correctly. Like it was that bad, right? And I couldn't even edit that part out. But you just get better. Yeah. You just get better. It's like it's like getting up on stage again and again and again and again and again. It's going, you're going to get better to the point where, now I can do a live and it'll still be pretty good. I mean, last week I did one. I messed up the intro. I'm like, okay, it's live. Hey, let's do this again. Pause for a second, slow down, take a deep breath, go at it again. Who cares?
No.
Right? Nobody really cares. And what's going to happen is.
Go on, Jeff.
Yeah, and what's going to happen is it's just going to make you even more endearing. It's going to be like, wow, that guy had the balls to get up there and actually do it. Maybe I should do something like that too. That's what people are going to think. And the ones that think differently, well, F them. You don't need
Yeah,
them anymore.
exactly. No, I was going to say exactly the same thing. I think making mistakes, owning your mistakes, and just getting on with it makes you into a real human being. And people connect with other people. They connect with humans. They don't connect with people that are pitch perfect every single moment of the day, because it's unachievable. It's not real. And that's like the Photoshop world, but in publishing sense, you don't always have to be on point every second of every day. I think one of the things that just to touch on something you just said then, which I don't do, which I was thinking, which we talked about earlier, which is about doing the podcast live. I never thought about that. I've done a few of my own, so I do a Q&A into my groups, and sometimes when there's questions aren't coming in, I'll just think, oh, I'll just go do my next podcast episode, and I'll record the podcast episode as I'm doing a Q&A. So it saves time. So I'm doing the Q&A anyway. No one's asked me a question, so I just answer a generic question, record the audio, and then put it on as a podcast. But you did something else. So what do you do with your interviews?
So basically what happened was I noticed I was recording way too far into the future, right? And I just felt it was kind of disrespectful to bring someone on the show, record their voice, record their thing, and then say, well, no one's going to hear about this until September, right? And it's like January. So I was like, something to hell with this, right? So I set up my account so that I can do it live. I figured out how to get my camera to be a webcam and make my iPad the screen that's right under the camera. So it's like, okay, like I did all that technical stuff, and I would just record them live. Right. And the cool thing about it is that recording live, if you just do that, right? I know a number of people that just do lives now. It's one and done. There is no editing. There is no going back. There is no, trying to, adding in sound effects. I mean, you can get a stream deck and you can sit there and, and control it with your right hand as you're talking, right? But think about it. If you're on a sales call, if you're on a live sales call with somebody, you're doing this live anyways. You need to perform. You need to come out there and you need to have a solid presentation. So I think most of us, mid-level career people, however you want to call it, are already, we're already very professional at this. So to actually interview with somebody, over Zoom, over Riverside, or, using Ecamm, whatever your tech of choice is, you're already doing it. And if you're going to make live the centerpiece of your offering, then great. There is no editing involved because you just did it live. You hit start, you started talking, and then you hit stop when you're done. And that's it. You're done. And then your team can go and create the quote cards and take the audio and repurpose it to Kingdom Come. And that's fine. Right. And that's really great, because what's happening is that, first of all, the networks still want lives, right? They've already conquered, the pictures of your cats eating people food. They've already conquered the photos of you eating in a nice restaurant, or, sunsets in Bali, or, all that neat stuff. Right. And, recording a video and actually uploading it a few days later. Yeah, they do that too. Right. But now, the next frontier for these networks, and these networks I keep on referring to are, LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, is live. And if you subscribe to someone's channel, you will get a notification on your phone saying, hey, this guy is going live. If you have notifications enabled on LinkedIn, it will say, hey, Jeff Mendelson is going live right now, right? None of those apps are necessarily telling you that, hey, Jeff just made a new post about his business musing of the day, but it will tell you that I'm going live right now, and it will stay in that notification feed. And what happens is that also builds a compendium of knowledge, right? That also builds this, when people go and look at, when you go and cyberstalk somebody, when you want to know, like, is this with this person says that they're a TEDx speaker and they're a sought after speaker and they made, $20 million or whatever, should be pretty easy to cyberstalk them, right? So if you go to their LinkedIn profile, you go to their YouTube channel, and, well, if you see that they have 11 subscribers and 2 views, yeah, they're starting, right? Now, I'll be honest, I'm still starting with the YouTube channel, but on LinkedIn, it's like, yeah, I have a pretty sizable audience. Why? Because that's a network that I've been developing for much longer than I have been with YouTube, right? And what happens is that it's done. It's up there. Go for it. Please, please go check out, one of my interviews. They're actually pretty interesting. Lately I've been getting some really interesting people on there, and it just creates this, it creates an excellent medium for you to show off your work, show off your strengths, because you are bringing these interesting people on your show. Or if you're doing it live on your own, then great. You probably have a slide deck of notes that you're reading off of, and that you're, making a presentation like the 5 tips you need to make LinkedIn work for you, whatever. Great. I watch those all the time as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and just one final thing on this before we move on, doing lives doesn't just work when you're interviewing people. You can do your podcast, like I was saying, doing a podcast live means it's done. And one thing I found, which is sort of counterintuitive almost, but when you do a live video, you can't stop. You can't press pause and redo. And so if you've got a 10-minute video to do, you'll get it done in 10 minutes. Whereas from experience, and even though I've done thousands of hours of videos, if I do it offline, I will stop and make mistakes because nobody's watching. And, when I make mistakes, I'll stop. Whereas if I'm live, you just fudge through it. And when you listen back, and after that was terrible, you listen back and think, you know what, it was all right. It's fine. Let's just go. Because when you're live, like when you're speaking like now, like the way I'm speaking now, if you transcribe the way I've just said those past 3 sentences, it would probably make no sense at all. But because it's part of a conversation, and because if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my face and it's just the way that this conversation's going, it actually is totally fine. And so that's the great thing about doing something live, is you're just forced to just battle on and keep going. So I think it's a brilliant tip.
All right. Yeah, cool. I mean, going live, it really does bring you superpowers. I highly recommend that everyone should. I think for LinkedIn, you still need to apply, but for YouTube and Facebook, the power is there. Just literally turn on your phone, turn on your camera, and just talk.
And you can use, what do I use? StreamYard. I know. What do you use? You use something else?
So I use Restream.io. And actually, there are a few new ones coming out, like Riverside.fm will also record and go live. And, you can use Ecamm if you're on a Mac. And, each one of these are going to bring different types of strengths.
Just for anyone who's not accustomed, these are the apps which basically allow you to go live on your computer, and then it will stream to multiple different social media channels like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, maybe. You're not sure.
No, so Instagram, you still have to do like off. You have to do Instagram straight through the app.
Okay,
but there are ways around it. So there's this one app called OneStream.live, which allows you to record a video, and then you can live stream it to Instagram. So that's pretty cool. So there's like all these different things that you can use. If there's something you want to do, there's most likely an app that can either do it directly or can get you around whatever limitation is there.
Yeah. Live Pigeon is one that I played around with for a little bit. Did the same thing. You recorded it not live, and then it looks like it's going live when it's going out. But I end up never using it. I always do my lives live, so I thought, what's the point? So maybe in the future I will, but I don't know. So if you see me live, it is really live at the moment anyway. So just moving on from this, so we've got people sort of started, hopefully, over the barriers of just getting your first episode out there, realizing it doesn't need to be perfect. Idea of going live to save time, save editing, and actually just getting content out there. But one thing that we talked about when we had a chat a little while ago, which was, I thought, a really, really nice idea, was to create a podcast website. So a mini website, so to speak, purely focused on your podcast. Can you just tell us a bit about the idea of this and how it works and why someone would want to do this?
Sure. So basically what happens is that you need somewhere to host your audio files, right? It needs to be hosted somewhere so that the directories, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Apple, so that they can all pick it up and make it available, right? Now, what happens is that those directories are not your website, right? So you cannot put, if I go look for your podcast, Steve, on the Apple Podcast app, I'm not on your website. I'm still on Apple Podcasts. So whatever call to action you may think you have on there is frankly, it's not there. It's not your website. All right. I'm going to say it's not your website a couple of times. So let's just drill that into your head. Then the host that you're putting it on, let's just use Buzzsprout as an example. Buzzsprout will give you, let's call it a website homepage, where you could say like, jeffmendelson.buzzsprout.com, right? And it'll host your files and it'll put a picture up there and maybe a banner, but it's still not your website, right? So, let's just be clear. It's not a page that you control 100%. Why is that important, right? If you want to put some kind of pop-up that says, hey, if you want to download Steve's 10 tips on becoming instantly productive, or you want to download Jeff's, you want to get on Jeff's newsletter, you can't do it on a Buzzsprout site. You can't do it on Anchor. You can't do it on Libsyn. You can't do it on any of these other things. But when you have a website, either whether it's by WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, what have you, at least that's a website that you can control, right? That's one where you control what graphics go where, you control the banner, you control the image, you control the player, and then you have an infinite amount of space to put whatever you want into that description for that particular episode. On the sidebar, you can put a call to action. Give me your email address and I'll send you my 10 tips to do X, Y, and Z. Or, I can display not only the show notes, but I can also show you the transcription. Best of all, you can pixel them, right? So you can put your Facebook pixel on there. And then even if they visit your site, even if it's for a hot second, right? They visited your site. I don't have time to listen to this right now. Great. You just pixeled them. Now you can send them ads, right? And that's the most powerful part, is that now you've captured them. Maybe you didn't capture their email address, but now you can capture them in terms of pushing more direct ads to them, because you know that they have visited a page that's about productivity, or they have visited a page that's about time management, or they visited a page that's about financial accounting, whatever it is. You can then segment that traffic because you have a pixel that's collecting that information. That is primarily the biggest reason why you should have make your home base for your podcast, not where you're hosting it, but actually your own website, so that you can offer more in addition to the episode than just the episode itself.
Yeah, I love it. One of the things that I got, one of the real valuable nuggets I took away when we had a chat. And so I've yet to implement this, if you're listening to this podcast anytime soon, but I have been looking into this. And there are lots of, depending on what you're on, you mentioned WordPress before. So actually there are a load of WordPress themes specifically designed for this purpose. And they'll take your stream, they'll put it on there, and they've already laid everything out nicely. And so it doesn't need to be some technical or expensive thing to do this. You don't need to hire a web developer to design it from scratch. You can actually get someone to just play around with a template if you haven't got loads of money and you're happy with something out of the box. And so, I think it's a really sensible and just logical thing to do. That capturing.
I think it also comes down to branding, right? Yeah. Like, why send somebody off site if your brand, is your name, or if your brand is, like Coca-Cola? It's like, why would you send them to Buzzsprout if you're Coca-Cola? Right? You need to, all of your assets should be, the central hub for them should be in one place. So what happens is that when you control the branding and when you control where everything is hosted, then you control the message. You control the next step. If you watch the movie Glengarry Glen Ross, which I highly recommend you do, the thing they drive into your head very early in a movie, ABC, always be closing, right? Because someone listens to your podcast, then what? What do you want them to do after that? Right? It's a simple question. Do you want them to listen to another episode? Do you want them to follow up and join your newsletter? Do you want them to buy a product or service from you? That's really what it comes down to. What is the next step? And the best way for you to control that is by owning the traffic and owning the site that the home base is actually available on.
Yeah. And you just made me think of something here, which might be useful for people. And if you've got a really popular episode, that should be your first thing that people land on, or that'll be the first thing that people land on when they search. But then your end card, you're saying what happens next. If you've got an end card, if it's on YouTube, then an end card can send them to the next thing. So your next most popular episode. And this is something we did by accident, but it seemed to work really well. So if you're new to this, then this will be interesting.
Right. So think about it. So let's say, for example, somebody listens to your podcast, right? And then you put on the end card, like, did you like what you listened to? Hey, I have this infographic of the top 10 tips you need to know about specifically on the subject. Please go here.
Yeah.
Right. And that should be a natural for you, right? You should always be thinking about the next step. What is the next thing I want them to do? And if it's just listen to another episode, maybe that's nice, but it's not exciting. Right. But what is the next step? Is the next step you should be giving them so much value that it becomes a no-brainer for them to give you their email address so that you can continue serving them to the highest level.
Yeah.
And you just need to keep that needs to be your singular focus for every single piece of content that you create. What is the next step? Why am I doing this? And how is it serving my community?
Brilliant advice. Okay. I just want to touch on one last thing because I like to travel. I know you like to travel too. I've just come back from a week in Spain, but you went a little bit further afield quite recently, and you went off to Brazil. And I know you have connections there and can tell us a bit about that if you want. But when you were there, you came on the mastermind, you were there, and you were basically fully set up. And that's an interesting thing. I have a pretty remote business, but I haven't gone as far as to have my full studio with me in my bag. And so I can run my business from my laptop or my phone, generally speaking. Doesn't require me to be in any specific location. And that's the sort of the lifestyle business that I've chosen to create. But you definitely take it one step further. So just before we finish, do you want to just touch on that? Because I think it's
sure. So let me just say that my backpack was very heavy. Okay, so make no mistake about it. Those people that pose like, oh yeah, I'm working from this thatch hut in Bali. Yeah, that's all bull, because it's not bull. They are, right? But the equipment needed to do that. The little webcam that you plug in, I brought a boom arm with me, right? My lightest boom arm, but it's one that fit in my backpack. I brought a dynamic mic with me that plugs in USB, and my backpack was very full, right? But what it allowed me to do was to continue recording from a WeWork in downtown Sao Paulo. And it was great because really what was happening was I did not miss a beat. So, I tell people I was not on vacation, right? I still went to work 5 days a week. I still, got up in the morning and took an Uber to where I needed to be. I was just in that mindset. My wife had, her things to do. She hadn't been back in country for a year plus. So she wasn't able to, so she really needed that time to go visit family, friends, and, whatever business she needed to take care of. But I'm not going to carry her luggage, right? So, I went to do my thing and she went to go do her thing. And basically what that meant was I just brought all my stuff with me to a WeWork and, set it up. And, that attracted a lot of attention. Right. All of a sudden, it's like, who's this guy that sets in the common area? Right. I didn't take like an office. Right. I just set it like in a common area. All of a sudden, I set up this boom arm and I got this little mic going in front of me, and I put the little webcam perched on top of my laptop. And yeah, you're right. That's exactly how I worked. And what happened was, it just allowed me to not miss a beat. Right. It allowed me to, to still keep on going, because again, I wasn't there to go around. I've been to Sao Paulo so many times, like, please, you're going to bring me to, to that downtown market again. Like, all right. Yeah, I've been there. It's like, I don't need that anymore. But, bottom line, I could have done the same thing from a beach location, right? As long as I have a decent internet connection, I can still continue what it is that I'm doing. And that was most important for me. But yeah, that backpack did weigh a ton, right? But I was able to keep everything rolling. And I think that was the biggest boost in productivity for me.
Yeah. And it means you're not spending time away from your family when, your family wants to go somewhere and you don't your business is still going and you can't take time out for whatever reason or don't want to. You want to continue doing what you're doing. but it doesn't mean you have to be separated from them. I think that's a really powerful
right.
thing.
I mean, you know, like if you go on holiday, right? You know, I'm not going to bring the boom arm, right? And I just got a new iPad, for example, and I've been last week I went on another trip to Nashville in Tennessee, and I did it just with the iPad, right? So that was my first time traveling light, right? And it worked for me. I was able to do 99% of everything that I needed to do on that you know, on that iPad. I just didn't schedule any recordings for that week, right? But I was able to still be connected and productive and have everything ready to go. And it really comes down to, you know, like the type of tech that you have. You know, can you do this from your, you know, from your 6-inch phone? Yes. You know, can you do this from your 13-inch laptop? Yes. You know, but you really need to make yourself comfortable and have the gear ready to go. So when you do go a little bit further afield, that you're actually able to stay more productive. I mean, I don't think I would be happy being totally cut off for 10 days on a beach. Right? I would just go completely nuts. So the fact that I now have an iPad that I can just take with me and go sit in a corner while everyone else goes and plays in the sand, that's how I enjoy myself. Right? And I think my family and my kids, you know, they all kind of respect that. Yes, I do spend a lot more time with them when I do that, but also I'm able to attend to my business and able to keep my sanity and the things that I enjoy as well. And that's what keeps everybody happy, because you really don't want a miserable Jeff on your beach vacation, right? And you know, everyone's gonna interpret that a little bit differently. You know, my wife is also a workaholic, so she also does, you know, she's checking her WhatsApps when she should be in the water. But hey, you know, that's how she runs her business, right? And it really just comes down to, okay, you know, we were able to get away, but you know, we stay over here. Changes in latitudes or changes in attitudes. And what happens is that it just makes things much more fun, you know, just to do it from a different location, from a different view, from a different, you know, just, you know, with different, you know, with better coffee and with, you know, with different types of food and, you know, all that neat stuff. It just adds so much of a better spice to the week, 2 weeks, or the month that I spent in Brazil, you know, still continuing to work and getting things done.
Yeah, I totally agree. Fantastic. Jeff, thank you very much for sharing everything you have. It's been brilliant. I would like to finish with just a few signature questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
First off, I can't remember if I've pre-warned you to these, so if I haven't, then
you have not. So let's do it.
We'll shoot from the hip. Okay, so what are your favorite apps or browser plugins and why?
So my favorite apps right now, I am going deep into Apple Notes. It is the fastest note-taking, you know, just simple clipboard, you know, sharing or just note-taking application that goes across all my devices. I also use Things, which is a great project, which is a great task manager. And one of the reasons why I like that one so much is that, to the exclusion of the others, and I'm sure probably others, you could probably do this, right? But if I put that something is due today on Things, right? What happens is that, you know, like everyone makes up a to-do list of, you know, 20, 30 things, and we only get to like 4 to 10 of them a day. And then when you log in tomorrow, then all the other ones say, okay, now you're a day late, 2 days late, 10 days late, 30 days late, 60 days late. It's with Things, it still stays as today, you know, no matter what day it is, it's today. So that kind of helps me out because, you know, it stays there, but it doesn't like make me feel bad that, geez, this thing's 182 days late. Right. So that's one of my big things. Also, I am loving my Stream Deck. That's not necessarily, it's an app plus hardware, but it's something that I can, you know, it's a little macro keyboard, you know, that has a screen and you can put icons on it and you can just program it to do, you know, to do quick things like, you know, start and stop a feed or start, you know, like launch an application or type a bunch of things in for you. It's a really, really good time saver.
Cool. We had a little gander at your Stream Deck when we were doing the mastermind. So I almost bought one actually. And then I couldn't get one. I actually went to the shop and they sold out. And so I took that as a sign, but I will get one at some point. But yes, if you've not never seen a Stream Deck before, check them out. They're cool little bits of kit. So I agree. All right, next question. Who else do you think would be a fabulous guest on this podcast?
I just interviewed a guy named Christopher Nahibi. Turns out he's the CEO of a bank out in California, and he is a very interesting guy to talk to because he is not selling a course. He's not selling a lead magnet. He just really wants to educate people on financial literacy. And the interesting thing about him is that, he's got a real estate, brokerage. He does a lot of real estate deals, both for his bank and for his clients. He has a property management company and he owns a couple of banks. And he was surprisingly easy to speak with and easy to, just easy to relate to. And I would highly recommend, you reaching out. I'll be happy to pass on his information so you can reach out to him.
Yeah, sounds like a very, very interesting guy. That'd be great. Okay, next question. The title of this podcast is Systemize Your Success, but what does success mean to you?
Success for me, and I realize my bar is really low here, is the fact that I can travel and live life on my terms and on my timeline when I need to. So I alluded to the fact that last week I was in podcast movement. Next week, I am driving my daughters to Tallahassee and New York City for installing them in university. A couple weeks after that, I'm going to San Diego for the Traffic and Conversions convention. And then a week after that, I'm going to Funnel Hacking Live in Orlando. If I had a boss, I would not be able to maintain that travel schedule. And certainly not, not without my wife and not without, bringing my gear with me, things like that. And really what happens is that I consider that as time that I am, I'm still working. I'm not going to any of these places necessarily for a vacation. I do enjoy myself immensely when I do it, but, and I do enjoy working out of my home office, for example, but, changing scenery is incredibly invigorating for me. And especially after that year-long lockdown that most of us have been through, I'm ready. I need to get out there again. So that for me is the biggest part of success. Not everyone has it, and I wish it for everybody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more again. Very last question. Do you believe you can systemize your success, and why?
Yes, I already have. In that I showed you on the mastermind, and I'll be happy to, go through this on a different occasion with your, with your audience. But when for example, for me to onboard podcast guests, I already have an application form, which leads into a very simple CRM that Zapier then takes and creates a profile sheet for me. It creates all the file folders. It creates the project templates that I need in order to kick off that project, so that after I'm done recording them, then my team can, the writer goes and writes, the social media person does the social media, the audio guy does the audio, and the project manager coalesces everything together. And all of that happens pretty much automatically. So it's it's a combination of a couple of different apps. And it's actually I'm proud of it. I was like, wow, you can actually do that with Zapier. You can do that with ActiveCampaign. You can do that with Aweber. You can do that with Google Drive. Yeah, it's all there. So so I already do a lot of that. There is always some work to be done on it in terms of how can I make this better? How can I skip a step? But for the most part, it's a system that really takes about, a 45-minute onboarding process of creating all those folders and that whole schema of what I need in order to get things done, to basically having the guests do all the work for me. They fill out their own intro. They fill out their one big tip. They fill out the date that they want to record. They fill out, if they have a lead magnet, they give me their email. They give me their LinkedIn address. It's all there. 90% is already filled out.
Yeah. Again, couldn't agree with you more. It's a very, very similar way to the way we do it. So, cool. Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure. If people want to get hold of you, find out more about what you do, who you are, how can they find you?
Sure. So you can look for me very easily, jeffmendelson.com. My podcast lives there. And I also have a podcast production service called Agents of Pod. So agentsapod.com, feel free to check that out where we talk about podcast strategy and the production. So if you need any help with that, please feel free to hit me up.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jeff. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, man. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Cheers. Bye.